Well, Jeff, I see we're starting our adventure in a cemetery. What, or maybe should I say who, are we looking for?
Ray, we're in Buck Cemetery in Bucksport, Maine, in search of a monument to town founder, Colonel Jonathan Buck.
Well, it's kind of hard to miss. There's a big sign right over there that reads Jonathan Buck Monument, and directly behind it sits an obelisk.
That's it. Okay, take a look at the front of the obelisk just below his name and tell me what you see.
There's a stain in the granite that looks like the lower half of a leg, right down to the pointy toe.
Well, some locals will tell you that's the mark of a witch who swore one day she'd dance on Buck's grave. I'm Jeff Belanger.
And I'm Ray Auger, and welcome to episode 39 of the New England Legends podcast. If you give us about 10 minutes, we'll give you something strange to talk about today.
And thank you to everyone who's been subscribing to and reviewing our podcast. Our download numbers have been growing by about 20% month over month since we started this weekly podcast 9 months ago. We're on our way to documenting and chronicling every legend in New England. But to do that, we need your help.
With that growth also comes more costs. More hosting costs, advertising costs, and more time to put these episodes together. So this week, we'd like to introduce you to our Patreon page. If you go to patreon.com/New England Legends, you can pledge either $1 per month or $5 per month, and it'll sustain what we do and help us take it to the next level. At the $5 per month level, you'll have access to exclusive bonus episodes and material, special videos, and show notes.
We're building a community that connects through these stories, and would appreciate your help.
All right, Jeff, back to this cursed grave in Bucksport. I'll grant you the stain looks like a witch's leg, but how did this all happen?
The story goes back to the 1790s when town founder Jonathan Buck was particularly cruel to an old hag of a woman some believed was a witch. So he had her burned at the stake. In one version of the story, as they were setting fire to the wood around the stake, the witch proclaimed,
"And I shall dance upon your grave."
In another version of the story, the witch burned at the stake, but in a rather weird way. At one point, her leg below the knee rolls out of the fire and lands at Jonathan Buck's feet. And in a third version, the witch was hanged, but before the noose was placed around her neck, she made her ominous proclamation about dancing on Buck's grave.
No matter what version, it explains this strange stain of a lower leg here on the monument. But there's more to this story.
There is a lot more. So let's start at the beginning. Jonathan Buck was born in Woburn, Massachusetts in 1719, but he was raised in nearby Haverhill. There he married a local woman and they had 9 children together. But by the late 1750s, Buck wanted to set up his own mill and shipbuilding operation. But he was denied the opportunity by those in power in Haverhill. So he sailed north.
In June of 1763, Buck settled land he called Plantation Number 1 in Maine. He built the first sawmill and the first store in the region, and quickly became the driving force behind settlement in this area just south of modern-day Bangor. But trouble was brewing.
And that trouble came in the form of the Revolutionary War. The British had just built Fort George in modern-day Castine right at Penobscot Bay at the mouth of the Penobscot River. This allowed the British to control the bay and anything heading up or coming down the river. So on April 14th, 1779, 60-year-old Jonathan Buck took up arms with most of the men from the plantation and helped lead the Penobscot expedition down the river in order to attack Fort George. But it didn't go so well. The operation was a failure. Buck and his men were no match for the organized British Army.
The following day, with the plantation mostly defenseless, the British took advantage. The British ship HMS Nautilus sailed into the plantation's harbor, and the men burned the village in retaliation for the siege. They threatened to kill anyone who didn't swear allegiance to the crown.
So with his mill and store lying in ashes, Buck walked back to Haverhill to live with his son and regroup.
By the time the Revolutionary War ended in 1783, Jonathan Buck returned to Plantation Number 1 to rebuild. The burgeoning town was renamed Buckstown Plantation in his honor. The region was growing again. The British were gone, and Jonathan Buck finally had his shipbuilding enterprise.
Jonathan Buck died March 18th, 1795. He was considered a local war hero, a successful man of business, and the town founder. So the town decided to rename itself once again to simply Buckstown in his honor. He was buried in the Buck family cemetery with a simple headstone marking his plot.
Wait. Today, this town isn't called Buckstown, it's called Bucksport. And you're telling me that this obelisk monument isn't his grave? And what about the witch he burned at the stake?
I know, those are important questions. First, the town name. In 1817, the town renamed itself a final time from Buckstown to Bucksport to honor not only the town founder, but also their growing interest in shipping, the very reason Jonathan Buck left Haverhill for Maine. But that doesn't explain this monument.
It turns out this impressive monument was erected in August of 1852 by Jonathan Buck's great-grandchildren, who felt the town founder needed a more prominent memorial. It's placed here at the corner of the cemetery, so it's easy for all to see. Buck's actual grave and body is only a few feet away.
After the obelisk had withstood a few decades of Maine winters and summers, this strange stain started to form in the granite. Over years, the stain darkened to look like the leg and pointy foot of what we see here in front of us now.
And what about the witch burning?
Well, this might be the strangest part of the story. Nothing like that happened.
What do you mean it didn't happen? Then how the hell does anyone know about this? What about this stain?
Well, we can trace the roots of the witch story to a 1902 article that appeared in the New England magazine, written by one James O. Whittemore. This article allegedly recounted what happened on that fateful execution sometime around 1790.
All was ready, and the hangman about to perform his gruesome duty, when the woman turned to Colonel Buck, and raising one hand to heaven, as if to direct her last words on earth, pronounced this astounding prophecy.
Jonathan Buck, listen to these words, the last my tongue shall utter. It is the spirit of the only true and living God which bids me speak them to you. You will soon die. Over your grave they will erect a stone, that all may know where the bones of the mighty Jonathan Buck are crumbling to dust. But listen, all ye people, tell it to your children and your children's children. Upon that stone will appear the imprint of my foot, and for all time long, long after your accursed race has perished from the earth, the people will come far and near, and the unborn generations will say, there lies the man who murdered a woman. Remember well, Jonathan Buck, remember well.
That's a brutal curse. But you're saying it didn't happen?
There's no record of any sort of execution of any woman anywhere near here during this time period. We need to remember that Jonathan Buck was living in the town that bears his name almost a century after the Salem witch trials. Executing a person for witchcraft is something that just wasn't done anymore, especially in any sort of public way.
So you're saying this is fake news circa 1902?
I'm afraid I am. A bored writer working for a magazine heard people were coming to gawk at this outline of a leg and foot on the granite monument of Jonathan Buck, and heard some of the speculation as to the backstory, and so he took those rumors and made them sound official. The stories were swirling anyway, and with this in print, well, few argued the tale anymore.
So this honorable man's name has been dragged through the mud, all because of a curious stain that formed in stone over a marker placed here over a half a century after his death.
That's right.
Well, I'm glad we were able to sort this all out. I guess the buck stops here.
Oh, man, really?
Sorry.
This is a curious case where we have something tangible. You can come to this cemetery and see this leg and foot mark on the obelisk monument. You can even see a photo of it on our website if you click on this episode. That it couldn't be explained and it didn't go away made the stories that much more tantalizing. It spread. And once it made it to print in 1902, you have something that's as solid as granite.
In a weird way, this, quote, cursed headstone has drawn a lot of attention to a man who may have otherwise been lost to history. This stain forced us to ask questions and learn more about one of those salt-of-the-earth early New Englanders who helped lay the groundwork for all of us.
I guess any attention is still attention, right? Even if we can't explain it, we can't always see the end game when it comes to a legend, can we?
No, we can't. We do have one other announcement to make this week, though. We're introducing the Legend Line. If you call us at 617-444-9683, you can leave your own story or a legend you heard of on our voicemail. As a reward for those of you who are still here and listen past the music at the end of the story each week, we're going to start sharing some of your experiences and tales in future episodes.
Thank you to Michael Legge and Lorna Noguera, who lent their voice acting talents this week, and thanks to John Judd, who composed our theme music.
Until next time, remember, the bizarre is closer than you think.
Witchcraft.